Starfield has many problems about it. We've talked about a small fraction of these in my previous video, which was just a rant about Redditors giving this game a Steam Award for the most innovative gameplay. But today, just as I promised, we're going to go through all of Starfield's main storyline and see if it has the issues that break the player's immersion into the game. Spoiler, it has. And to prove that, I want to start from afar and point out a small yet extremely important detail about the game's community that I don't think many of you would have noticed. To prepare for my videos about fictional universes and different stories, I often use fandom wikis. I used it for my Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty videos just a few weeks after the DLC was released, and I also used it for my Invincible video. But I didn't use it for this one, and not because I thought I've explored all of the game on my own, just because there aren't any notes I was looking for on Starfield Wiki. More than 4 months after the game released, and the game's wiki doesn't have even the basic information about several extremely important for world-building characters, and even some of the plot details. This is the best example of how Starfield's story fails to create a loyal fanbase and hold the players interested in its world. With this pointed out, I want to say that I don't make this video to gloat about the mistakes Bethesda made in this game. I really love games, and most of all, I love the stories these games tell. And instead of just ranting about how I think something is bad, I want to give my own perspective on how to make the story better. With this out of the way, let's start our journey into the settled systems. So, the game opens up with our characters working in a mine and establishes two characters, Lynn and Heller, both of them being annoying as hell with unskippable dialogues about literally nothing. Seriously, the only valuable thing we learn in the first 30 minutes of gameplay, that are actually the key to being hooked up on a story, is that we are looking for some kind of anomaly. While previously, Lynn specifically pointed out that it's just a regular routine day in the mine.
Just do what you did last time, and you're fine. Follow my one simple rule.
And that someone from Constellation is coming to pick it up. So, we pick up the artifact, get a bad trip, wake up, give the artifact to Barrett, and are literally forced to go with his guard robot to meet Constellation. And when we actually do go and meet the Constellation, we see that this space rock that gave us a concussion actually does something when paired with another space rock. And that's all. This is literally all world building we get. Oh, we also fight a pirate gang in the space and are forced to land again to raid their outpost with no actual reason. But okay, it's a shooter game and it cannot make any sense but still contribute to the gameplay experience. Fair. But that is all we do to learn about this world before we get involved in exploring the unknown parts of this world. Everything is unknown for us at this point. At least use some kind of a movie explanation like it was done in Fallout 4. It would make so much more sense to actually understand the setup of this world before getting into it. But okay, Constellation, space rocks, and weird acid trips from touching rocks. So Sarah, who is like a sort of a group's leader, tells us that Constellation is a group dedicated to exploring the unknown in space. And the problem with Constellation being an explorers group is that we don't really explore anything. We don't open new stars or travel routes as we're flying across an established world where if you travel to any system, you can get into a space event with some random stranger ship asking you for parts.
Oh no. What are we going to do now?
We don't explore new planets, as basically every planet has some sort of human-made structures on them. And we often see ships landing on the surface. And most importantly, we don't find artifacts and temples. Literally every artifact we find, except the first one, was found by someone before us, was just left there or taken by exactly 2 private collectors that used it as a trophy without any actual interest in the artifact's origins and capabilities. Like when you find a chunk of space metal that gives you visions first time you touch it, doesn't it at least give you some interest to find out what the hell it is? And it's extremely important that these artifacts give visions only to the first person who touches it. So all of these caves and mines we find the artifacts in were made by people who found a shiny unknown thing buried in the rocks that would probably cost a fortune if sold to the right people. And they just say, okay, let's wrap it up, guys, and don't touch that shiny thing. From the beginning of the time, people literally built the global economy by touching shiny rocks. And now you tell me they just decided to stop doing that? Huh? And literally every temple with a space magic power we find is located on a planet with some kind of settlement or structures on it. Do these people just look out of their windows and think, wow, a creepy structures with flying rocks and unique architectural style that was here before we came on this planet?
Very well. I have mushrooms to catalog.
When you ask the Constellation members about the group's history and achievements, they give you vague replies, like they try to get you invest in their Ponzi scheme. It's completely unknown what did Constellation do before they discovered the artifacts, and what was the reason of their existence. The way Constellation is established reminds me of these VIP grinder clubs for rich people, where they just smoke cigars and play blackjack and look rich and cool for hundreds of thousands a year. And the way to fix Constellation is either to make it a new organization that you assemble with Barrett, as you both had a bad trip after touching a space rock, and find associates and financing, which would make for a great entrance for all of the companions, and especially Walter, who we would have to persuade into becoming our sponsor, and not just listen to him being a skeptic for no other reason, but to make his later transition into a guy who cares look like he gets some character development. Or alternatively, which works best for a new world that needs tons of world building to be interesting to explore, you can make Constellation be an actual explorer organization. Write down some history about their discoveries, some facts, give them some discovery achievements, possibly make them be founded by former NASA employees after leaving Earth. Make their numbers reduce over time, so by the time we get to them, we only see a bunch of people most loyal to their ideals that try to preserve the legacy of their organization for generations to come. This would make so much more sense, as it would give us an understandable motivation as to why they want these artifacts so much, and why do other people question their existence.
The Explorers Group? I thought they were kind of a joke.
Not a joke. You're just too young to know better.
They want to outshine their predecessors and make Constellation a prestigious research organization once again. And speaking of outshining your predecessors, Sam Coe. This character could be so much more, but his entire story gets drowned because of a lack of proper world building and setup for the reveal of his heritage. When I first heard him say that he is a descendant of some big shot guy and everyone judges him by the deeds of his ancestors, I sincerely wanted to sympathize with him, but I just couldn't. Imagine if you meet a rich kid of someone you never heard about, and he starts to tell you how you probably want to hang out with him just because his dad is a big shot. No, I fucking don't. Who the hell is your dad? This is exactly what happens in this case. Imagine if instead of hearing about half of the miners don't believe Earth exists,
Half the crew doesn't believe Earth exists, but it's still there.
when it's literally a planet right next to the biggest mining settlement in the settled systems, we hear about Solomon Coe. Maybe in the prologue Instead of Heller, they could have put some kind of a Freestar Ranger war veteran, who would say how good things were in the times of good old Solomon Coe, and let us ask some questions about who he was and why he was so important for the world. But no, first time we hear about Solomon Coe is from Sam, and it kills the whole narrative of this story. Other companions are even less interesting. While they should have been a great tool to use for establishing the world we spawned in. And the saddest part here is that Bethesda genuinely tries to do it through these characters. We learn about UC Vanguard through a mission with Sarah, who doesn't tell us anything meaningful about her past, while she could tell us more about, let's say, the war between the United Colonies and Freestar Collective, which I found to be the only interesting piece of lore in this game. Same goes for Sam, by the way. It would really be nice to have 2 points of view on this conflict, instead of just learning about it only if you really want it, like I had to. Then we meet Vladimir, who is an ex-pirate, and later we learn that there is actually a no getting out rule in the Crimson Fleet, possibly establishing him as a badass guy who could put piracy behind him, but this arc isn't explored at all. So he could tell us about his time with the pirates, potentially teasing the Crix's legacy storyline and giving us an answer on the most painful question in this game. Why doesn't UC or Freestar Collective just make a direct, concentrated hit on the pirates' base, which is located on a small prison complex, the location of which is known to basically anyone? We also return on Vectera to find Barrett and learn that he somehow became friends with the pirate that kidnapped him, without us actually seeing him use his diplomacy skills, which encapsulates the main problem of this game's storytelling. It just tells you that things are the way they are. It doesn't show you this, it doesn't prove it, it doesn't explain it. It just says this is so because I say so. And this problem is the main reason why the game has such a poorly coordinated storytelling. And there is also Andreja, who kills some dude in the cave and asks us not to tell anyone about it, because everyone will think she is dangerous, when by the end of the game our main character probably has the highest kill count in all of the settled systems. Okay, this is just ridiculous. So every chance this story has to give us important pieces of world building that will actually help us understand the universe of the game and encourage us to explore it more, it fails, which is sad. And a major reason why the game doesn't tell us anything meaningful about its world is because there is nothing to tell. In 180 years of humanity having access to FTL engines and establishing completely new factions, there are only 4 pretty small settlements on 4 different planets, which even in this quantity doesn't make any sense. Let's take New Atlantis. The city was founded exactly 180 years before the main story takes place. For 180 years, the city built a dozen skyscrapers and an underground ghetto, which was doomed to become a ghetto because you don't fucking live underground. There is no explanation, no actual reason on why the city of New Atlantis was built this way. People start to build vertically when they don't have enough place to build horizontally. And the rest of the planet the city is built on is completely empty, with a few exceptions being a few mining outposts. I understand that Starfield wanted to make a Coruscant-like city with vertical layers, but having people live underground instead of building suburbs and exploring far reaches of the space instead of exploring the planet makes no practical sense. Aquila City, the second oldest city in the settled systems, is just a bunch of sandstone buildings in the desert. Let me recite that again. Second oldest city is a bunch of sandstone buildings. And it's even smaller than New Atlantis, even without skyscrapers. And the game wants us to believe that this nation had won the war with the United Systems. I guess it does tell you something about the game's world building if the most dystopian sci-fi unrealistic city in the game is actually more realistic than any other city. We understand why it did not expand, because it's literally built on water. We understand why people live in those poor conditions that they live in, and we understand the corporate ladder behind all of this. It's much easier to believe in Neon working as a city than it is to believe in any other city in the game, including New Atlantis and Aquila City. So, apart from Neon, Cydonia is the only settlement that does make sense. The only place where it doesn't is when we realize that this is the last quote-unquote big city in the galaxy. We also have smaller settlements like Paradiso, which is a tourist attraction village with a seaside, which I don't know why anyone visits, considering that there are suitable places to build a beach resort on the planets of New Atlantis and Aquila City. And this would basically cut the supply and travel costs for the visitors in half or even more. So at this point we should stop talking about the world, as it makes no goddamn sense, and just let's focus on the main story. So after we collect the several artifacts and get acquainted to every Constellation member, we finally meet the story's antagonists, the Starborn. These guys seem like they're extremely interested in the artifacts we collected and are ready to open fire to get to them. So what do we do after we find out an unknown group of unknown beings equipped with unknown but clearly superior technology wants to get the artifacts we collected, even if it means attacking us directly? Nothing. We don't even put the artifacts in a safe. Instead, after getting a few more artifacts, the group decides to split, with half of the members going to the space station to recalibrate it. And while we are sent to retrieve yet another artifact from the most annoying character in the whole game, and by retrieve I mean attack him until he surrenders the artifact to us and tells his security team to let us go, even when he could have ordered them to attack us when we get far from him, which is completely expectable and logical, but we get out of it with no consequences and go back on our home base, I guess. So we arrive at the lodge, we lose communication with the space station, and we are informed that the Starborn, known as the Hunter, is coming for us, and he already paid a visit to our friends on the space station. So the game gives us a choice, either to come on the space station and help our friends there, or stay and defend the lodge against this Starborn guy who is already on his way. Realistically speaking, there shouldn't be any choice here. It takes us about 10 minutes to get to our ship if we stay at the lodge, and it probably takes 10 more minutes to get to the space station. We don't know that for sure because the game doesn't give us any means of transportation apart from fast traveling, so we need to spend like 20 minutes on the road to get to the space station and help our friends. Help them to do what exactly? We know that the Hunter is already on his way to the lodge, and they are not in any immediate danger apart from the injuries they've sustained from the battle. And any space station should be equipped with some sort of first aid kits, or at least means of communication signaling the authorities about an emergency, for them to dispatch some kind of space ambulance. And we also know that not every companion at the station had sustained injuries that prevent them from immediately standing up just after we speak with them later. So why is that even an option? The obvious and logical option here is to stay and defend the artifact where the strike is going to come next, and not leave on what apparently is Constellation's only starship to go to the space station where everything is relatively safe at the moment. But the game makes a big deal out of this choice and kills one of your companions depending on your decision. In my case, Sam Coe was killed during the attack on the space station, which is a perfect tragic conclusion to his story that works really well. Seeing his daughter mourn her father and act hostile towards us since his death does give his death a substantial emotional weight. And it's one of the moments where the game's writing hits its peak. But Sam Coe is not the only companion that can die here. In fact, any of your recruitable companions can and will die based on your relations with them. And though it is a cool idea to kill the one most dear to your player, which gives your quest some real consequences that you can feel, the scene where we find the companion had passed away works only with Sam. In any other case, the only reaction on their death we get in that scene is Noel's top-notch voice acting cry.
He's gone.
And everyone just saying that they're gone. And that's all. It would work well if we had to leave them behind, or we had some kind of imminent danger coming to us that didn't allow us to properly express our reaction. But the danger has passed. There is no reason why we can't have the same moment of some other companion having an emotional reaction to seeing the deceased one. And I know that the team is established as being well experienced, and they've probably seen death many times, which accounts for the lack of emotional response. But then the character death just doesn't hit as hard as it should. That's why I think Sam Coe's death is the best scene out of all possible ones. Seeing the man's child crying over his corpse really gives you chills, even if you didn't really care about these characters. But at least we got some sort of a payoff for this scene with the funeral sequence. The problem with it is that it takes too long to get to. 5 in-game days is a very long time, in which I've completed the whole pirate side quest arc and finished the main story, and I would have missed it if I didn't need to go to the lodge to speak to my companions before finishing the main story. At this point, I already didn't feel any strong emotions about this character's death, because I just forgot that happened. It would have been much better if the funeral happened in just 1 or 2 days after the death, for these feelings to still be fresh. But the whole funeral quest was good. I really enjoyed listening to how all of these characters expressed their grief, with one little detail. They all expressed it the same way. When Sarah recruited us to Constellation, she implied that it's a place for people with different views, morals, and backgrounds. And what we got is a bunch of people with exact same morals that react to almost anything practically the same. They all have this lawful good morality and don't step out of it even if it seems logical by their background or actions. For me, it was cemented by my interaction with Andreja, who, along with Vladimir, has a very tough background. So the game's companions can sometimes give you different gifts based on their personality. And Andreja always gives you credits. So it looks like she sees value in money and thinks of it as of the best gift she can give you. But when you say that Constellation can earn a lot of money on their research, she disapproves of it, which like anyone else from the team would have done as well. This makes the companions look like they have a hive mind of sorts, and all have the absolute same morality, which is impossible given their differences, and which makes Sarah's statement about the diversity of the group basically untrue. So why did I put this up now? Because it feels like the dialogue choices we've been given on a funeral speech should have belonged to the companions we speak at the funeral. In my personal opinion, instead of just saying how she doesn't feel anything about the companion's death, and us trying to cheer her up, Andreja should have been more focused on revenge, as it's basically in her character. It's the first thing she does when we find her. Instead of Sarah just saying how she lost a lot of people in her life, she could have said more about Sam's daughter and worry about her, as Sarah is a compassionate and caring person. But all we got where the copy-pasted reactions expressed in different words, which just doesn't really work on me. Not after learning these characters' backgrounds and personalities. So now let's get into the main narrative of the story. We hear the hunter talk about ending our existence in unity, and for some reason decide that it's not a pompous threat from a murderous lunatic, but a real thing. Matteo heard a priest preaching about the concept of unity on his Sunday church visits, so we decide to talk with this priest, and he gives us a riddle about a pilgrim who visited the leaders of 3 main churches in the game and gave them a part of the key to understanding unity. So we go to speak to other believers, and they give us their parts of the story with coded messages inside. We return to the keeper, and he just deciphers the message on his own, revealing the coordinates where we need to go. And that's it. I'll be honest, I hate riddles and puzzles in games, but this particular one looked very promising to me, and I really wanted to see the process of trying to piece this all together. We're playing for the guys who specialize in these kind of things, right? But instead of uncovering this mystery with Constellation, we just get all the answers from a space priest. This just doesn't make much sense in the context of the story. So we go to the coordinates from the story and find the pilgrim's camp, where we see 5 books which we need to read and memorize in order to open the door to the last one. This was actually good because no one solved the mystery for us, and through this the writers have ensured that we have read the books that supposedly have crucial information for understanding. So this last book gives us new coordinates, and there the temple gives us new coordinates. I was pretty sure the next stop will also give us new coordinates, but no, we have arrived at the meeting place with the Starborn that attacked us before, and they invite us on their ship, which is quite polite of them considering they've killed one of our friends and wanted to take the artifacts by force. So we decide to dock with their ship, and this is the moment where we think that all of our questions must be finally answered. In this scene, we get a reveal that Starborn are actually human, but they've come from an alternative version of our world and traveled the multiverse. The goal of their existence is to collect artifacts into a key through the center of the galaxy, which sends them into a new reality and repeats the cycle. We also get a reveal that one of the Starborn, the emissary, is our companion. Only they're not, because they're from an alternate dimension. And the hunter is an alternate version of a keeper we spoke to about the pilgrim's notes. At this point, the Starborn have created more questions than they actually answered. Most important of them being, why the hell are they doing this? With the game implying that they are becoming more powerful, but we still defeat a lot of Starborn on our path without any complications. I will hold these questions for when we see the full picture. So let us move on. Next up, we collect the remaining artifacts. And here's where we go through my favorite quest in the game, where we react to a distress signal only to find out the facility is A-OK and everyone thinks that we're messing with them. But it turns out to be a complicated interdimensional loop that was caused by experimenting with the artifact. In this quest, we need to switch between dimensions to get to the lab and get the artifact, fixing the loop. And this is actually a really great quest that I have enjoyed, even if it felt much longer than it needed to be. If all artifact collection quests were on the same quality level, the game would be much better. Both from the gameplay perspective, as we don't need to do repetitive cave exploration, and also from the writing perspective, as it's obvious that people that find the artifacts would do everything in their power to squeeze any research data or money from it, and not just leave it untouched in a mine or a cave. It even has a trolley problem, where you need to decide which one of the 2 realities you want to make real. The one where everyone is okay, but this one guy who tried to end the lockdown was locked in another dimension, or the one where this guy was teleported, but everyone else is dead. Yeah, it's a pretty obvious choice, and this guy also said that he was willing to sacrifice himself for everyone to survive, but it's still much better than most of the choices in the game. And after we collect the artifact, our last stop lies in the solar system, where we uncover the mystery behind what really happened with the Earth and how the grav drives were created. Long story short, this guy had found an artifact on Mars and had a talk with his alternative self, who explained the concept of the grav drives to him and basically gave him all the data for it. The only problem was that this technology was imperfect, and that after the grav drive travel became an everyday thing, it started to affect Earth's atmosphere, starting the countdown for the planet to become uninhabitable. That's when the humanity has left Earth and the settled systems became settled. And do I really need to point out that this doesn't make any sense? So, the scientist knew that it will destroy Earth, as his alternative self warned him about it. But why didn't the alternative self give him the updated schematics? If he knew about it, it means that this has already happened in one reality, and yet it didn't affect any other planets, as the technology was later improved. So why not give the improved technology from the start? If the alternative scientist wanted Earth to be destroyed as sort of a price or a driver for people to explore space, why didn't the original scientist at least ask him about it, or try to find the cause of a problem before spending his pension on a NASA facility? From what we can see, he doesn't seem like a guy who wanted this, and he acknowledges the destruction of Earth's atmosphere as a collateral damage for his mistake. But he didn't even try to prevent it before it happened. It's either he wanted Earth to be destroyed for humans to venture into space, which makes him a psychopath, or it's just a writing issue and a plot hole. We can figure that the technology was improved extremely quickly after Earth was left behind, as no other planets were affected by constant grav jumping. Only Earth's atmosphere was destroyed. So if it was a problem that just required a few years of troubleshooting, was it really that big of a problem to solve? Okay, the scientist wanted grav drives to go into mass production as soon as possible. Great. Just make the first generation for mass production and focus on eliminating the issue in the second one. And just tell everyone that they kinda need an upgrade or Earth is gonna be destroyed. Whoopsie. That's what you would have done if you didn't care about yourself and only cared about people exploring space. And I'm sure that the manufacturers would have loved the idea, as anyone who bought a first-gen drive would now have to buy a second-gen one. Maybe with a little discount. But this way you can both save the planet and complete your goal of creating a faster-than-light travel drive. So this whole explanation behind the Earth's destruction is an overly complex and just simply unnecessary reveal. Earth's history could remain a mystery, which always serves great for the game's community, especially in Bethesda games, and keeps it afloat by nerds like me who like to theorize and research the game's lore to figure out the mysteries ourselves. And if you wanted to make a reveal that would actually make sense in the world that you've created, you can just move the interdimensional quest to Earth. This NASA facility on Earth have been used to experiment with the artifact for much longer time than in the lab from the last quest. And it would have been a great journey where we would have to explore both versions of the facility with different nodes scattered across dimensions. And maybe even talk to the original scientist, as time doesn't necessarily pass normally in other dimensions, and learn these things from him directly. The artifact is a piece of an unknown technology that can shape time and reality, or even more, something we don't know, which would explain why Earth's atmosphere was destroyed, with it making much more sense. So the Earth's destruction reveal doesn't really make any sense. It could be much better if you just delete it from the game, or at least try to explain it so it would make much more sense. And now it's time to talk about Starborn. First thing I don't seem to understand is their hierarchy, or a chain of command. From one side, they appear as a sort of disorganized group that attack you to get the artifacts you collected. But then you remember the emissary saying that many of the Starborn have the same views as him.
In the wrong hands, the power of the artifacts can make anyone a tyrant. That is why we watch over them. The only thing you are watching out for is yourself.
Though they are individuals and act on their own behalf. And after we finish the investigation in the NASA facility, we get attacked by several Starborn that do not fight each other, but really want to kill us. Which means that they are in some way organized to fight us, instead of it being a free-for-all race to collect the artifacts. And yet they are not with the emissary and not with the hunter, as these guys warn us about the attack. But after we talk to them and actually make the choice between the two of them, or decide to pursue the Unity on our own, it doesn't matter who becomes our enemy. They assemble an army of Starborn within hours and get ready to defend the last artifact from us. The game tries to establish the moral difference between the emissary and the hunter, set them up as a big good or a big bad, which seems really wacky and childish. Like, let's give this good guy a white suit and the bad guy a black one, so the player will get the metaphor for sure. And the most ridiculous thing here is that their differences don't matter. If we side with the hunter, we'll have to fight the emissary and other Starborn he's friends with. If we side with the emissary, we'll have to fight the hunter and the same Starborn who were friends with the emissary. It doesn't make sense to me already, but we are only closing in on the main thing. So I was playing a sort of a dark playthrough and wanted to test how certain obviously bad choices would affect the game, and sided with the hunter. After that, I went to the lodge to speak to my companions before leaving, and not a single person mentioned that I sided with the guy who killed one of ours. They just didn't care. What they did care, however, is how we're gonna pass through the Unity. Some of them wanted to go, some of them didn't. But that's not important if we move forward and just start to think. So in order to get to the Unity, we have to go on a final quest in a temple and pass through a lot of Starborn. When we get there, we'll meet our Starborn enemy, in my case the emissary, and we can actually persuade him into giving up his artifacts and letting us win. Just so you know, this works with the hunter as well, and it also works with two of them if you choose to not support any of them, which is, yeah, you guessed it, fucking ridiculous. I have never seen so apathetic antagonists in any of the stories I've read or seen. They say they need your artifacts. This is literally the only thing they need in their lives. And then they just give it up because you said pretty please. And do you know why? Because all of this is meaningless. And that's why. If we pass through the Unity after siding with the emissary, he will refuse to make the journey, deciding to settle down in our universe. And that's what we see in our final scene.
The emissary remains in this universe, but your faith in them inspires them to seek out those they believe are worthy of finding the Unity. Many noble Starborn will be reborn under their guidance.
Yep, you heard it right. New Starborn. So this means that the artifact is not a single-use thing, but a key that stays in the lock after we've used it. Which is weird because we've traveled to the center of the universe with this artifact that is the only key to the center of the universe. Are you still with me? He makes new Starborn using an artifact we took with us to a place only accessible by the artifact. Okay, let's say the artifact gets scattered across the galaxy once it's used, and these guys will have to go through all of these caves and mines just like we did. Then why do Starborn care for it? Why do they fight and die for it if it's not single use? Oh, right, they don't die. Remember how the emissary and the hunter said that they've met for countless times and only one claimed the armillary in the end? Then how the fuck did they meet so many times? Isn't it the point? One goes through the Unity and the other is forced to stay in one universe. And knowing the hunter and his violent approach to collecting artifacts, he probably killed the emissary many times, and yet he returns and meets him again like nothing happened. This honestly feels like Bethesda's writers tried to play the mind games with themselves and lost, because there's no actual sense for any of these guys to be fighting us or each other if that is the case. And another factor is how many people can actually use the artifact to go to the Unity. Some of our companions express their interest to go through it, but we don't see them in the final scene, so we can't be sure they went through it. But if they did, what stops the Starborn from just asking us for the artifacts and building a big space bus with the armillary inside and just letting us in for a ride? If the only thing they all want is to get to the Unity, then why just not do that together? Okay, some of them have moral differences, which is okay, just split in several groups and do that after each other. The artifacts are not single use after all. You have all the time in the world to assemble them instead of just fighting us. And here's another thing I don't understand about Unity. What real value does it have for Starborn? The game establishes that the Starborn are looking for power and the Unity gives it to them. Fair. Except it doesn't. Temples do. So why instead of looking for artifacts and waiting for us to approach it and attack, they don't go to temples to learn new powers? I mean, temples are unguarded, they are not single use, you can access them without the armillary and learn whatever new space magic you want. Oh, and I also have one more question. When we decide to pass through the Unity, we appear in the universe precisely at the start of our Constellation campaign. Why then? I know it's for the gameplay reasons, but what's the lore explanation for that? What factor decides in which time period are we going to appear? If it's the first time we touched the artifact, then it's untrue, as by the time we get to the lodge, the piece of the artifact is already delivered to the Constellation. And also, what will happen with our companions that come with us but didn't touch any of the artifacts and didn't have any visions? Why do Starborn appear in this particular time period? And if that is the time when they actually find their first artifact in their original universe, then how does the alternative Victor Alza give him the graph drive schematics? The technology is seemingly from a way older time, and there is no actual explanation on how his doppelganger touched the first artifact on Mars at the time when no graph drives were discovered, and somehow collected the rest of the artifacts and became the Starborn in his lifetime. And I swear I'm almost done, but there is still one more thing. The biggest reveal of this game that we've been building up to for the whole game, about space exploration and uncovering the universe's secrets. Who created the artifacts? So the only thing we learn about the artifacts is that they were created by creators for unknown reason.
Unknowingly, you just answered your own questions. For who creates things but creators? That is what they have been named throughout the endless circle of time. Are they one or many? Human or alien? Terrestrial or celestial? One day, you might even meet the creators, but not this day.
I'm done. This is even more sad when you remember that this is a Bethesda game, the studio that created vibrant and unique lore for almost anything that exists in the Elder Scrolls and Fallout universes. It's like, imagine if Dwemer ruins were just creators' ruins, that had a bunch of cool looking magic stuff inside, serving no actual reason. It's just sad to see this stuff, as Starfield could have been much more story-wise, and could be a great replayable story that would utilize the New Game Plus mechanics to the maximum. And yet, even the main choice between good or evil in this game has zero consequences, zero reaction from your companions, and brings zero changes into your experience. Now, that's the time when we need to make a conclusion. We start as a member of an explorer group that doesn't discover anything prior to our arrival with the artifact. We are meant to explore the world to find the artifacts, only to find out that they were all found before us, except the first one. We compete with a group of dimension travelers for a full set of these artifacts, as it is their only purpose, only for them to freely give the artifacts up if we have a way with words. We do all of this to discover the true purpose and origins of the artifacts, but in the end we don't learn anything new. And no matter if we choose good or evil, the world doesn't respond to our decision, and even the enemies we have to fight remain the same. All of this makes the game's main story completely illogical and meaningless, which is especially problematic when we have to go through it again and again in a New Game Plus. Now, let's wrap it up. I voiced my opinion on how you can make some of the elements of the story better throughout the video. But to conclude everything I said, the game needs just several major elements. First, actual impactful choices. If the game is based on being replayable, every New Game Plus should provide a different experience. And I'm not saying about making small changes to character encounters in the New Game Plus. I'm talking about taking actions that can alter the world around you. Baldur's Gate 3 has become one of my favorite games of all time, just because of that diversity of choices you can make. And it has a pretty linear story that doesn't have a New Game Plus mechanics. You can massacre this village, or you can save it. Depending on this choice, some of your possible companions will become hostile to you, or decide to leave your party, or will just disapprove your actions in an impactful way that will close some of the interaction you can have with them. And that is just one of dozens of big choices you can make. Hell, only through Act 1, you have 7 points where you can kill one of your companions, Lae'zel, in a completely understandable manner. Of course, Starfield's scale with all of these planets and stars is much bigger, but it feels smaller compared to BG, just because there is so much more stuff to do in Baldur's Gate than in Starfield. Second thing is a meaningful lore. I didn't really think I'll say that about a Bethesda game, but the lore in Starfield is bullshit. I'm talking about the faction history, the destruction of the Earth, history of Constellation, lack of representation of key historical characters like Solomon Coe, and of course the artifact origins. If you don't know how to explain the artifacts and their origins, just don't. Let the community put up some theories that can actually make sense, and just pick the one you like the most for the reveal in a future DLC. Yes, this is irresponsible writing, but it's much better than this. In any case, just let in some more people with bright ideas, and let them write some books and stories for the game's universe that you can choose from. I bet that there will be a lot of people who will be honored to do that. And third, there are at least 6 artifact collection quests without a storyline, where you just need to come in a cave, grab the artifact, and optionally kill a Starborn dude and get out. I'm not saying to do the quests of interdimensional travel for every quest line in the game, though it would be real nice, but I'm saying that it doesn't feel like the main story, when half of your walkthrough you just collect trinkets from a procedurally generated caves. And that's basically it. You just need to change these 3 things to make this game much more than it currently is. The main problem with Starfield is that it was too ambitious to be a big game with a lot of explorable planets, with actually nothing to explore on them. Bethesda put quantity before quality, and that became their downfall. Starfield had a lot of potential to be a great exploration game that has tons of points of interest and exciting stories to explore. And it may still have it, as Bethesda intended the game to be expanded with DLCs and free updates. The only thing is, if Starfield gets a DLC with a decent story, who is going to buy it? And that's all I have to say about the game's story. I may do a few smaller videos about the game's faction quests, as some of them genuinely have potential but fail to naturally express it. So there are some more things to talk about. In any case, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing for more detailed content like this. I'm only here for a few months, so the absolute majority of viewers are not subscribed. So I've maxed my persuasion skill to change it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Until then.